What's up, guys? I'm Chris Spags here, back with another Four Corners video for today's 11-game NBA slate, courtesy of Awesemo.com. Now, today's going to be a weird slate with a lot of teams still playing for something, a lot of teams playing for nothing. So like this video right now and comment down below, giving me a guess as to which near minimum priced guy you like the most. If you have the right guy who has the most value at near minimum price on either FanDuel or DraftKings, I will give you a special shout out in tomorrow's video. So right now, like this video and leave that comment with your guess as to which value play is going to be the best down below. The first corner I'm going to hit on is a game with the Celtics visiting the Wizards. This one is a 224.5 point combined total, which represents a 2.6 point drop for Boston and a plus 0.7 for Washington. This is the regular season finale for Boston, and pretty much every Celtic is out today with Kyrie Irving, Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart, and Gordon Hayward expected to be sitting today for Boston. It's going to be a lot of usage opened up by those guys not being out there, so things are going to change materially now for Boston, and pretty much everybody who's left gets more appealing as a result. Terry Rozier is expected to be the lead ball handler today, and he seems worth the 29% expected for him. He is going to be able to handle as much as he wants today, and the spot versus the Wizards is a nice pace-up one. It should be pretty hospitable to him, so Terry Rozier, 29% ownership, it all checks out to me. Jaylen Brown is expected back in the rotation today, and he's a guy who's really going to be able to shoulder as much usage as he wants. He loves to gun, he loves to rebound as well. Both those things should be here versus Washington. To me, he deserves more than his 13% ownership expected for him right now. I think he can have an upside day here on a day in which there could be a lot of cheap guys who have upside days. For Daniel Tice and Robert Williams, both guys are viable plays today given how poor the Wizards interior is. They should be both seeing in the high 20s of minutes. A lot of opportunity there. I think both guys are playable. Williams is going to have more ownership on him, so it might be more logical in tournaments to go to Tice, but I really don't have a problem going with either guy given that they're both very cheap and the opportunity is very much there for them today. Brad Wanamaker, Gershon Yabusele, and Semi Ojeleye are all in play, and I think I would rank them in that order in terms of my priority. There's just so much opportunity to go around that one of these guys can also spike a big day. RJ Hunter and PJ Dozier as well should be getting enough minutes where they can have the opportunity to get that day going. The Wizards will allow it to happen. Again, the pace and just poor defense all around. There's opportunity for these guys. It's hard to trust them, and I would certainly rather trust the Terry Rozier, the Jaylen Brown tier of guys more. But these guys are in consideration because they're just super cheap and they can spike an upside. On the Washington side, Troy Brown is likely the only Wizard with really guaranteed run. I don't mind him here, but on a per minute basis, really hasn't been that good since moving to the starting lineup. So Troy Brown, okay, but not a guy I'm dying to get to on a day in which we do have so much value that can spike an upside. Devin Robinson has been really good per minute, putting up 1.15 fantasy points per minute in a very limited sample size. I think I'd be interested in him if he were going to get enough run, but it seems unlikely he gets enough run to actually be valuable. He's probably going to get in the high teens, low 20s minutes, and you really want him to be in the mid 20s. Definitely possibly gets there, so I don't mind some exposure in a mass multi-entering environment, but overall, probably not worth a ton of. The next corner I want to hit on is a game with the Warriors visiting the Pelicans. This one is a 235 point combined total, which is a slate high, and it represents a 4.2 point boost for Golden State and a 2.6 point drop for New Orleans. DeMarcus Cousins is projected for 28% ownership, and even though revenge games are not proven by data, we have seen some spots where guys who are particularly spiteful and are going to have the opportunity to do so do spike those upside days. Mario Hezonja does ring a bell, but DeMarcus Cousins going against New Orleans, returning to New Orleans for the first time as an active player. He had left there with some acrimony. It's a spot here which I think his usage should push up a bit. I think they're going to feed him the ball. I think this is a spot where I'd trust that ownership on DeMarcus Cousins, maybe even go a little bit above it because he really can spike a big upside day here if he so chooses. Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant would be interesting to me in that order, but again, I think the usage is going to flow more to Cousins here. This is really the season finale for these guys. Even though they have a game tomorrow, they're expected not to play on that back-to-back, so I really think all these guys are in play as Cousins pivots, but I wouldn't want to play them with Cousins. I think it's Cousins or bust here in this spot with a game that really means nothing for the Warriors, who are locked into the number 1 seed right now. Alfred Payton should have the keys to the castle again if Julius Randle and AD are out. AD is probable right now, but that status hasn't actually resulted in him playing the last few games, so it seems safe to assume that Alfred Payton is going to be there. Again, just had a ton of opportunity last time versus Sacramento, put up 60 fantasy points. I think he's worth the 19% ownership expected, even though the shooting for him is not there, and that does seem like something you'd want to have in this matchup with the Warriors. Ian Clark has at least 17 shots in his last 3 games. That's resulted in fantasy point production of 32.5, 42.5, and 51.5 fantasy points. The usage is there, and this is technically a revenge spot, though it's much less meaningful than it is for Cousins, who's returning to New Orleans for the first time. For Ian Clark, I think the opportunity has been there, and he's been doing well with it, and he's really going to have to score to keep this close if the Pelicans even have a shot staying in this. So Ian Clark is a guy who I think is worth matching the field on. Jahlil Okafor had 50.5 fantasy points last game with no AD and no Randle out there. If the same situation again, it should be a nice spot for him, even though defensively I do have some worries about him and how he should be able to handle the switching of the Warriors. But again, versus Cousins, he's really the big who has size who can bring it. I also think it's worth noting that Okafor does kind of ruin Christian Wood a bit. Christian Wood deferred a lot to Okafor last game. The opportunity not there quite as much with the same rotations with Wood. And Check Diallo's reasonable pivot to all the value out there. If both AD he and Randall are out. The minutes should be there for Diallo if those guys aren't in there, and the chances of a blowout would mean that Diallo should see an extended minute run. So overall, Diallo looks okay to me, but mostly as a pivot to the other value out there. The third corner I want to hit on is a game with the Knicks visiting the Bulls. This one has a 216.5 point combined total, which represents a 2.8 point boost for the Knicks and a 3.7 point boost for Chicago. Mario Hezonja has had over 48 fantasy points in his last 3 games. He's taking over the nominal point guard duties, doing a good job with it. Dennis Smith was actually back last game, but Hezonja still protected his run, still had a great job versus Washington. So I don't mind Hezonja here. I think he's in a nice spot. We do have Emmanuel Mudiay and Kadeem Allen out again. That's really been what matters for Hezonja, so I really have no problem running with him again. I think he's worth matching the fields in near 20% ownership. Mitchell Robinson still looks solid, but the fact that he's almost 20% owned and there's so many value bigs out there make me want to go a little bit under the field there. He's been under 33.25 fantasy points in his last 3 games, and the opportunity's been there. It's been good matchups that he's had, and he just hasn't gotten there. So Robinson's fine, but I think you maybe want to go a little under the field there because there are just so many bigs out there who can get a lot of rebounds, maybe even some easy buckets today. Luke Cornett looks solid to me as long as he's starting. Kevin Knox and Damian Johnson a little bit less interesting, but those guys were in play as well. The minutes and opportunity have been there for these guys. Cornett, though, needs to start to get there, and Cornett would be the most appealing of that trio as long as he does pick up the start. Jakar Sampson has had over 34.75 fantasy points in his last 3 games, and he had 45 fantasy points last game. The Knicks are allowing a slate high 47.4 rebounds per game. Sampson does rebound quite a bit, which gives him a safe floor. He also has been scoring pretty well. Just 5% ownership for Sampson right now. I think people don't want to pay that price up, but he's a guy who actually does seem worth it with how he's been offering production in multiple categories. And Walt Lemon is still an interesting play to me at just 1% ownership. His price is up, but the assist upside is here for him. He's also going to get some shots at the rim because of the Knicks just allowing that a lot. Mitchell Robinson may block some of them, but Lemon will get the takes at least at the rim. The usage has been there. Again, the assist upside is going to be there because the Knicks are so bad defensively. I think Walt Lemon's a little bit undervalued here at just 1% ownership. And again, with 11 games today and a lot of moving targets around those 11 games, I'm just going to give you a breakdown of the remaining items I'm looking at the most closely in the rest of the games that we didn't discuss. Luka Doncic is probable, and he's been over 53.5 fantasy points 3 out of his last 4 games. His price is up, even though he missed a couple games there, so that's a bit weird. But it's a great spot for Doncic today versus Phoenix. I think on the other side as well, Jamal Crawford interests me quite a bit. He's been over 44 fantasy points in his last 2 games since Devin Booker went out. It's been really good looking for Jamal Crawford, and I think he's a safer play than Josh Jackson at a much cheaper price. In the Houston and OKC game, the Thunder right now are playing to avoid the 8th spot in a matchup with the Warriors that would likely not go too well for them. So Paul George and Russell Westbrook are in play. I'd prefer Paul George. I think the fact, too, that the Thunder are playing for something means that the Rockets, who are also playing for the number 2 seed, should see their full run. James Harden's been playing in blowouts recently. The Rockets have just been blowing teams off the court in their last few games. So Harden's run has been shortened in that period, but I think he's going to see his full run if this one is competitive. So I think Harden's a pretty good play, and I think Paul George and Russell Westbrook on the other side are good plays. And these guys could lift each other up together if this game is competitive down the stretch. Charlotte Hornets are still in play for the 8th seed, so the matchup versus Cleveland is looking like one that's going to matter today. Kemba Walker projects right now for 30% ownership. That seems about right for him. The opportunity's been there. He's had some down days versus Cleveland this year. There's been a blowout against the Hornets, a blowout for the Hornets, but in his one day in which it was competitive, he did have 50 fantasy points. So I don't mind matching the field on Kemba Walker here. Frank Kaminsky as well is also interesting at about 5% projected ownership. He's had 3 straight games over 35.5 fantasy points since Marvin Williams went out, and that opportunity should continue to be there, Williams being doubtful today. And on the Cleveland side, Larry Nance still looks pretty strong to be, especially with Tristan Thompson expected to be out for this one. Kevin Love also out as well. So it's a good spot for Larry Nance to keep his run going down the stretch. And Charlotte very weak inside. The Lakers' Jamario Jones is expected to be the highest owned guy in the slate right now at 58%. He's a nice value play, but his first start was aided quite a bit by 16 rebounds, which seems pretty hard to repeat. I don't mind having some Jones exposure, but again, there's so much value out there. I'd want to go significantly under the field, have enough Jones, but really can get some other looks with my lineups elsewhere. A guy I'd rather go to is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's had 2 straight games over 45 fantasy points. He's also shot over 22 shots in those games. It's not a perfect spot versus Portland, but again, I think the opportunity is going to be there much more for Caldwell-Pope than it is going to be for Jamario Jones to spike another 16 rebound day as a wing. And for the Lakers, Alex Caruso also still in play. He's shown some big upside. The minutes have really been there with no Rondo, who is expected to sit out the finale as well. So Alex Caruso also more interesting play to me than Jamario Jones. In the Memphis and Detroit game, Detroit is playing for that 8th spot, which they have a very tenuous grip on right now. If they win out their last 2 games, they're in, so they're going to be bringing full effort today. If Blake Griffin is ruled out, Andre Drummond becomes a very compelling play. If Blake Griffin is ruled in, he becomes a more interesting play than Andre Drummond just because he takes enough off the table for Drummond to have a good day. And on the Memphis side, Delon Wright at 15% ownership seems about right. He had 2 straight triple doubles with over 60 fantasy points, but both games were against Dallas. This Detroit team is much less hospitable than Dallas team is right now, and Detroit, again, playing for something. So Delon Wright, not a lock play, but guy has been getting the opportunity, so I don't mind chasing his triple doubles, but just with where the field is. And also Tyler Zeller from Memphis, a little bit interesting. He's really the only big of consequence left, and they don't seem to want to trust Yvonne Robb. With Drummond in there, Tyler Zeller could see some more minutes, and as a value guy, again, could be a person worth having some ownership on, given that the field is expected not to be on him very much. And the Miami Heat are also still playing for the 8th seed, but they need some losses by the Pistons and by the Hornets, so there is some risk there, but they are still playing full steam. Goran Dragic and Justice Winslow will be the guys I like the most. Dragic has been losing some usage since Winslow came back to the lineup, so Dragic is not a lock, but really one of these guys should have a decent day here. Dwayne Wade not far behind, but a little bit less upside than both guys, so any mix of these three guys of Dragic, Winslow, and Wade would interest me a little bit on this slate. Now on the Philly side in the same game, I really don't trust anybody. Philly's not playing for anything right now. They're locked to the 3 seed. Even with Joel Embiid and JJ Redick out, you could see these guys see depressed minutes. I really don't want to go to the Zaire Smith tier of guys for Philly today, so really not much interest in the Sixers at all. So there we go. Those are the main things I'm seeing right now in today's 11-game slate. And of course, there was more in the column down below. The link in the description to Switch and Hedge, my column at Awesemo.com. Go in there, check it out. While we still got it, only a few more days left in this regular season. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, like this video right now and give me a guess right now as to which guy close to the minimum price is going to have the best day from a value perspective. Got a lot of options out there, a lot of guys I talked about today. Some more I probably didn't even get to. So go ahead, leave that like and that comment down below. And whoever is the closest or has the best value guy, get a special shout out in the video tomorrow. And the promo code Switch and Hedge will still get you half off the first month of any package at Awesemo.com. All the ownership projections and rankings as well as premium content. It's there for the NBA. It'll also be there for MLB, for the NHL playoffs, for PGA, for NASCAR. We have all these sports going on right now. So get an all access pass or just get an NBA one and ride out through the playoffs. But use that promo code Switch and Hedge to get half off your first month. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Four Corners video. So good luck and enjoy the dying days of the NBA.